start?
Okay, we can start now.
Okay,
Thank you very much for this interview. So, first, let's start from the Chinese students. So, how many students are there in your university, and what's your impression on them?
Well, Chinese students make up a great proportion of our institution. Around about 40% of all the international students that come here to Leicester come from China. Well over 1,500 students here at the moment. But of course, we don't just have Chinese students working with us here on our campus in the UK. Having opened a new campus in Dalian with the Dalian University of Technology means we have Chinese students working with us both in the UK and in China.
So, how about the cooperation with the Chinese in Dalian?
The cooperation with the Dalian University of Technology has gone extremely well. We're very proud to be working with a high-ranking university in the Chinese context. I'm very keen that when we go overseas and try and bring a Leicester education to other people in different parts of the world, where possible we like to do that in partnership. We want to work with strong institutions in those countries so that we can deliver things together. So the relationship with Dalian has turned out to be a very strong one. We're teaching STEM-based subjects, engineering, chemistry, maths, and it's a really imaginative program. So it means that the students who study in Dalian will be studying exactly the same courses as they study here in Leicester. And that means students can go backwards and forwards if they wish, or they don't need to if they prefer not to. So it's a very flexible program and one that's working very well so far.
So any plan for the future cooperation?
Yes, we hope to build on that cooperation. Certainly Dalian University of Technology and ourselves are keen to expand the work that we're doing on that campus. There's various other disciplines we'd like to think about teaching in the future. I would hope that as time goes on, quite a significant proportion of our international students will actually be international students but based in Dalian. I think it is important that when we build a relationship or a partnership, we try and make that a deep partnership, one that really works. So yes, at the moment it's focused primarily on teaching students, but it's also going to expand out into much deeper research collaborations as well, and that's an important initiative that we really want to try and put some weight behind.
So I heard you had a plan for cooperation in Chongqing, so looks like it's some problem. So what's the problem? So did you give up?
No, we're still having conversations in Chongqing at the moment about possible expansion of what we're doing. In that particular initiative, at the moment, it's focusing more on medical education. So medical education is one of the things we're very proud of here at Leicester. We've just completely revitalised our curriculum. It's the newest medical curriculum in the UK. It's been completely overhauled, and we think it's a very modern, forward-looking curriculum. We work with some countries on delivering that curriculum, and we'd be quite excited about the possibility, at least, of delivering that curriculum in collaboration in Chongqing. But there's a lot of work to be done, and of course one of the things we think is really important is we also mustn't spread ourselves too thinly. As I said before, it's important that where we collaborate and partner overseas, we do that in a really deep way. So I want to make sure that the partnerships we have are solid, really strong, and that we don't have too many so we become too diffuse.
So China is trying its best to build its own world-class universities. So what's your suggestions for them?
I think China already has some world-class universities, but you're absolutely right. It's working hard to try and improve on those institutions and perhaps grow the number. I mean, we all know, I think there's over 2,000 universities in China. It's a huge higher education network of institutions. I think the best ones that I'm aware of, at least, are indeed the ones that end up collaborating internationally. Certainly from my point of view here at the University of Leicester, one of our key markers is how much do our academics collaborate with fellow academics overseas, how many of our students have opportunities to travel. So we think internationalisation or globalisation is quite an important part of higher education. And I think for Chinese universities as they're developing, and they certainly are, it's quite impressive actually how quickly they're improving. I think a big part of that will end up being partnership. And through those partnerships, I think there's real strength to be had above and beyond what can be achieved by any single institution.
So universities remain a magnet for talents. So let's talk about the Brexit. So what do you see the impact on your university and on the talents from the foreign countries? I mean, as well as international students. Anyway, the impact of Brexit. on your university and the education of Britain? Yeah.
Well, you're right. You'll be aware that Brexit is probably one of the biggest decisions we've made for probably the last 50 or 100 years in this country. Deciding to leave Europe is a very major decision, not just for universities, but for society as a whole. You may be aware that universities in the UK campaigned to try and stay in Europe. So most people working in universities are enthusiastic about being part of Europe. We lost the vote, sadly. It was a close vote, but it was lost. And now, of course, you're right. We have to think about the implications, both for higher education as a whole, but also for our specific institution. And I think there are three main areas that we're concerned about. One is we attract a lot of colleagues from Europe to come and work here. We have a fantastic workforce. Around about 17% of the staff who work in the academic research staff working in my institution come from the mainland of Europe. So we hope that that will continue. We don't want to see that flow of really talented people coming to our university. The second thing, of course, is we attract students from Europe, and many students want to come to the UK to get a fantastic education. That's something we'd like to encourage in the future, but there will be some issues around whether that's going to continue to the same extent. And then, of course, thirdly, one of the real opportunities for universities in the UK is to participate in European-wide funding mechanisms, what we currently call Horizon 2020 and soon will be called Horizon Europe. Well, I'm actually fairly optimistic that we will continue to participate in those, but there's still a lot of work to do to get to that agreement. So I think we really need both the European side and our government to make sure they're thinking hard about the negotiation and trying to make sure that that negotiation is done in a timely way. There's an awful lot to lose if we don't end up continuing to participate in European-wide collaboration.
So how about the British academic cooperation with the other EU members? I mean, how this will be affected by the Brexit?
Well, at the moment, of course, we pay into the research system in Europe, and it is indeed the biggest research system in the world, the European funding system. Of course, when we leave Europe, that will change. Now, there are many countries who already participate in that system who are not part of Europe. Switzerland, Norway, Israel. There are a number of countries who continue to participate as associate countries. Now, of course, that's the goal for the UK. We would like to continue to participate. We'd like to become an associate partner. But there's quite a lot to negotiate. That the UK's budget, or our contribution to the overall EU budget, is quite significant. So clearly, if we're going to carry on paying in a very large proportion of that budget, we want to make sure that we at least have some influence over how those funds are being spent. And that's where the challenge, I think, for the negotiation comes.
So how is your past experience useful for your current post in the University of Leicester?
Well, I grew up as an academic, so of course I was an academic for many years, and I hope that experience helps me understand the way universities work. But I also, of course, before this job, worked for our government, and I worked as one of the chief executives of one of our funding agencies. So I ran something called the Economic and Social Research Council, one of the 7 bodies that the UK government funds to give money to academic researchers and others. That was a fantastic opportunity, and through that role I spent a lot of time actually liaising with Chinese colleagues, Indian colleagues, European colleagues, people in the US and elsewhere. And we built up a lot of research partnerships that still go on today. I also, during that time, took over as president of something called Science Europe. And this was an organisation in Brussels which represented funding agencies from every country in Europe. And that gave me real insight into the way that the European Commission works, the great job that they're trying to do to deliver their science and innovation network, but also gave me an opportunity to understand how each country relates to that network. And so I think those experiences are quite valuable. As it turns out, now we're going through the Brexit problems, it becomes particularly relevant, I think.
Right. So you are among the 48%, right, on the Brexit. So you have time to follow the ongoing process of negotiations between.
Yes, and certainly I'm one of a small number of Vice-Chancellors in the UK who works with our overarching organisation called Universities UK. And we spend time, in fact I go to Brussels probably every 6 weeks or 2 months to talk to MEPs, to talk to funding agencies in Europe, to talk to Barnier's team. So we have conversations both with our government here, but also with people in the European Commission and the European Parliament about what are we trying to achieve, what do both sides really want to get out of this negotiation. As I said at the beginning, I'm an optimist. I think we are fortunate that both sides would like the UK to continue to be involved in research, in innovation, and indeed in some of the other student mobility programs like Erasmus. But I still believe, while I'm optimistic that will happen, there's a lot to negotiate, so we have to really get round the table soon and continue that negotiation as quickly as we can.
So do you see the university or academic world has a voice in the negotiation?
I think the academic voice is powerful in the negotiation. I think the way that we've been able to explain the value of the collaborations we're involved in is important. I think academics really understand what's going to be lost, and it's not just about money. Nothing's ever just about money. This is about international partnerships. It's about bringing the best minds together wherever they might be in Europe and trying to tackle some of the most pressing global problems. We can do that to a degree on our own. We have plenty of good scientists in the UK, we have plenty of good funding opportunities in the UK, but actually for some of the biggest problems, you need to bring together the best minds wherever they are. So personally, having worked in a funding agency, I'm very keen that those agencies encourage more fluidity, more mobility of great minds. How do we bring the best Chinese minds, the best American minds, European minds together to solve the problems we need to solve, rather than seeing ourselves as rather isolated, separate organisations?
Yes. So just now you talk about academic research. So where does the UK sit in the global academic research?
Well, I think we can be very, very proud. It depends, of course, on how you measure these things, but there's no doubt, not only do we have a higher education system that I think many people point to as perhaps one of the best systems in the world. It's debatable whether it's really the best or not, but certainly a very strong system that's been going for many, many years now. I think in research terms, we have a very proud history, a lot of Nobel Prize winners, but also deeper than that. We have a lot of scientists doing work in a breadth of different disciplines that we can be really, really proud of. So we do find that Americans, Chinese and other countries really want to collaborate with UK researchers. And I think the reason for that is quite clear. We have some really excellent people here who do a really, really great job.
Good. So how does UK universities research compare with the rest of the other key players in the world? I mean, what more has to be done?
Well, I mean, there are a whole set of things that need to continue. If you look at, you can look at various measures. One set of measures suggests that when you look at the quality of the publications that are produced, compared to the amount of money that's spent by a country on its science, the UK comes out top. Well, that's a very interesting finding. It's showing that we're producing really high quality science, but at the moment, the UK doesn't put as much government money into funding as some other countries. There are certain countries like Singapore, Korea, but also in Europe, some of the Scandinavian countries and so on, are putting a higher proportion of their budget into funding science and innovation than we're seeing in the UK. So at some stage, the government has to grapple with that. And the great news is the UK government has recently made a commitment to increase that amount. They've already put more money into research and innovation in recent years. So I think the signs are good. We've just got to make sure that that investment matches our potential, that we don't underinvest and find out, you know, that we've really cut off our nose to spite our face, because of course investment in research and science is a direct way of investing in innovation, and that of course has a great way of influencing economic growth and productivity. So through early investment in research and science we can see our whole country improving. I hope that that message is strong, and as I said, I think our government at the moment has got that message and is doing its best to put some extra resource our way.
Okay, so just now you say the measurement. So one of the measurements is the university rankings. So what's your opinion on this?
Well, rankings of course vary considerably, and it doesn't, you look at one set of rankings and you get a very different interpretation to others. The set of rankings we take most seriously are the ones that are global. And the global rankings give us an indication of where our university sits compared to universities scattered across the world. And we're very fortunate this year to have had our highest ranking of all in the Times Higher world rankings. We think that's an important ranking because it does compare us to other institutions and what they're trying to deliver. But let's be honest about rankings, they have their downsides as well. I think we all know that certain institutions have strong, deep reputations. And just because they in one year happen to do well or badly in a ranking, really I think it's reputation that matters even more so than rankings. And the reason for that, of course, is your reputation is built on the strength of what you've been doing, often for very many years, if not hundreds of years. So I think rankings are important. We have to take them seriously. We know that students will be looking at them, but let's be cautious about them, and let's not forget that institutions have long-term histories that we mustn't ignore.
So the ranking will affect the competition for good students, as well as from foreign countries?
I think students use a range of things when they make their choices. Certainly the Chinese students we have here, who are a fantastic group of students. I have to say the Chinese students make a huge difference to our campus. They're really thoughtful students, very hard-working students, very globally minded, very engaged in social media and so on. So when you think about those students, what's made them choose this particular university? Well, I suspect for many of them they do have a look at rankings, but what they also do is they listen to their peers, they look at social media, they look at the way that the students who are studying here reflect upon their institution. They look at a whole range of things that helps them make decisions about, is this a place where I'd feel comfortable? We're very fortunate. We have a lot of international students here. About 25% of the students on this campus come from outside of Europe. So it's a very international community. We also happen to have a very international city. It's a very multicultural city. So I think it's quite a natural place for an international student to want to consider coming to. And it's also not a huge city. It's only about 300,000 people, so it feels quite safe, quite a friendly place to work in. And I think students take all of those different factors into account when they're thinking about where they might study.
So this year marks the 40th anniversary of China's opening and reform. So opening up to the outside world.
Yes.
So what's your comment on that? So what's your expectation from?
Well, I think China has made huge strides over centuries, but actually in those last 40 years, I think you're right, the opening up has made a huge difference. My personal experience of China has been very, very positive. We're engaged in a whole series of different collaborations. Some of those include our Dalian campus, but also include a wide range of different research networks, a wide range of different innovation decisions. So, for example, NISCO, a big Chinese company, is opening a centre here on our campus in the UK in the next few months. So it's a two-way relationship. It's what we can bring to China and what China brings to us. I think China should be hugely proud. We look at China from the outside, the rest of the world looks into China and cannot fail but to be impressed with the speed of progress that's been achieved in China. That, of course, raises some challenges. I'm sure the Chinese government is dealing with those as quickly as it's dealing with some of the successes it's had. So I think, as I said at the beginning, one of the ways to improve on what's already going very well in China is to think about how partnership can really help deliver even better than is being delivered at the moment.
Good. So Eric will ask you some more questions. So when you are answering his questions, you just look at me just for the sake of the video. Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to start. You are the fourth VC or the president that we talked to in a series of a series of interviews with the university heads in the UK. And we talked with them. They said they have these delicate balances to make. I mean, it takes patience, it takes courage, it takes time. And one of them is the university, whether it's a university for the people, or university for the elite, whether it's a university for where you can you uphold the political correctness or the freedom of speech, whether it's a university that is British or international. So these are all the very delicate balances that the VC has to make. What do you think is the most difficult one and how you handle it?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, and you've summarised actually some of the real tricky problems that I think you're right. It's a wonderful job being the Vice-Chancellor or President of a university, but you're absolutely correct. There are some challenges in there. One of the things we have to think about for our institution, if I go back to the way that my institution was established, we're actually fairly unique. We're one of two universities in the whole world that was established as a living legacy after the First World War. Quite a dark time in the period of the UK and other countries in the world, but instead of just putting up a monument, our city decided to establish a university. They decided that given it was a difficult time, how do we do something positive for the future? And that means that our institution was established as a living legacy. And we think hard about that. That means that our institution is embedded in the city here. It was members of the public who created a bank account, actually 100 years ago this November, to establish our university. That means that we come from the community. It's the community who established us, and we must never forget that. Having said that, when our university opened, there were 9 students, all of whom were women, and today, of course, we have many, many thousands of students. So we're a very different place. We're much more global in outlook. We have to balance that community focus along with that global outlook. And I hope we're doing a good job of that. I think that the university is something the city is very proud of. We contribute to the city in a whole range of different ways. But I think the city is also proud that this is a university that can bring international students, that can collaborate on international research projects, that can really make a difference to the world we live in. So both are achievable. It's just trying to come to a balance.
But when we speak about the whether it's a university of Britain, a British university or international university, it's good that you can put the two of them in your radar, on your minds at the same time. But we have this limited resources. I mean, if you recruit one more international student, we recruit one fewer British student. So what's your take on this?
Well, actually, the balance we're trying to strike is to make sure that we end up with a university that is, in a sense, appealing to students from all over the world. That includes students in the UK, but also includes students from elsewhere. Luckily, we don't have a system that restricts our numbers. So there's no cap on the number of students that we can take in. There's a physical cap. We can only provide so many resources, so many teaching rooms and so on. But generally speaking, we're keen to expand. So over the next few years, we're going through a £500 million capital programme over the next 10 years to expand the facilities here, increase the number of teaching rooms, provide more accommodation for our students. So over the next few years, we will see growth, and that means we're attracting both students from the UK and students from internationally to come and study in the University of Leicester. Yes, of course, you're right, we have to make sure we get that balance about right, but even so, I think if you walk across campus now, you'll get a real sense that it's an international campus, but one that has its roots quite clearly here in the city of Leicester.
As an international university, have you felt any implication of Brexit so far? And have you ever doing anything to brace for the possible implication you talked about?
Certainly, as far as Brexit's concerned, there have been some implications so far. So we're starting to see some evidence in the UK as a whole, but also in this university, that our researchers are perhaps a little bit less likely to be involved in European-wide funding programmes now. It's not been a huge difference, but the signs are there that things are starting to change. That's the reason why I said, both individually, but as an institution, we're spending quite a lot of our time trying to continue that negotiation with Europe to make sure that for both sides we don't end up with a crazy decision that means that we don't continue this wonderful work that we already do together. So the signs are there that things are changing a little bit. I don't think we need to get too nervous about that yet. And as I said, I'm ever the optimist. I'm convinced in the end that both the UK and Europe will understand that we must continue to collaborate in the future, and that will be for the betterment of all sides.
To what extent do you agree with the following statement? The UK, Great Britain, is declining, and it's declining gracefully.
Actually, I don't see it in that way at all. Brexit is an interesting problem. As I said earlier, universities really would have preferred that we could stay in Europe, and I think for a variety of reasons it's not a surprise that universities campaigned for us not to leave Europe. Having said that, I think from the university's point of view, as I said, I am optimistic that we'll continue to collaborate in Europe. And actually, one of the positives, if there is a positive from Brexit, is it's encouraged our university to think clearly about what other collaborations, what other partnerships should we be focusing more attention on. Yes, we want to continue to collaborate with Europe. We would never want to pull away from that collaboration. But this is an opportunity as well. This is a chance for the UK to sit back and think hard about, can we make more of those international collaborations that we perhaps haven't put quite as much energy into because we've been primarily focused on Europe in the past. So I think there are some positives that come out of this. The obvious thing that I'd like to see in the end is collaboration across the world, wherever it's most relevant. And the more fluid and flexible our funding system is, the better that would be.
As you said, we have the same thing in Chinese philosophy or culture, where whenever you are faced with a risk, you have the opportunity, and you are obviously an optimist who looks for the opportunities. let's go back to the Chinese culture and Chinese model, if that's the word. And in Chinese education system, we have quite different culture. Like we don't, as in the university, maybe there are not that many challenges, and it's different way of teaching, way of educating, cultivating. What do you think about this?
I think you're right. I think there are some differences in the culture of education between China and the UK, for example. Some of that, of course, stems from the school system. So things are done very differently, not just in universities, but right through the educational process. Having said that, of course, China produces some of our very best minds. The system is clearly working. When I was an academic many years ago, probably about 10 years ago, I had a number of research assistants and postgraduate students working for me, and the majority of those came from China. And it was because the work I did, very many of our Chinese compatriots are extremely strong in some of the areas I happen to publish and work in. So I think the two systems are different and deliver different positives and negatives. Each system is continually trying to improve. I have to say, my impression of the students that we receive from China is extremely positive. The students arrive here, they're very optimistic, they're very supportive of each other, they do their best to integrate and to try and learn about other cultures here on campus. So I've found it really enjoyable to get to know and to meet some of the students who've come from China. They're also very bright, and that helps in our classrooms as well. So I think the two systems are different, but actually both systems have their strengths.
What's the positive and negative sides of the British system, education system you just mentioned?
Well, I think we can be very proud of the UK system. We deliver a system that, in my view, is a nice balance between focusing your energy on certain topics but also keeping a breadth of understanding. So we try our best to train people so they really are trained in areas, so they have a really deep understanding of the area that they might want to work in. I think the Chinese system, there are some obvious strengths in the Chinese system. The Chinese system has real strengths in quantitative work, has real strengths in engineering, has real strengths in some of the biomedical areas. There's lots of areas that are coming through where China is starting to become among the very best researchers in the world. Well, there are things we could do better in the UK system. One of the things, if I think to the school system in the UK, is I'm a little worried that sometimes there's quite a lot of change. As one government party comes to power, they might have a different view of how education should be conducted, and they may make some changes, and as the next government comes in, they may make some changes again. I would like to see a slightly more stable system, perhaps a little bit more similar to the system we see in Finland or in some parts of Scandinavia. It's not to say that I think our system is broken or that it's imperfect in a sense. I mean, no system will ever be totally perfect, but there are some improvements that can be made.
As the Vice Chancellor, could you describe for us like what kind of decisions that you have to make every day and how you work with your team? And I suppose there are subcommittees that work around you. So could you describe for us the decision-making process or the decision-making that you have to do every day?
Well, as a Vice Chancellor of the organisation, in the end you're the Chief Accounting Officer. So in the end the decisions you take rest on your shoulders. But my view is that really there's a team of people who make the key decisions in this organisation. Yes, in the end, as Vice Chancellor, you have the overarching decision, but really I want it to be a team of top people who come together and really develop a strategy for the organisation. So I don't think it's fair to say that one person delivers that. It really is a team, and below that team there's a whole host of other colleagues across the university, right from our cleaners and our estates workers right up to our very best researchers. If we can work as a team, one university really working in the same direction, that's how we deliver. There's a whole series of decisions we take, and of course part of my job is to continually think about how we improve. How do we make this institution even better than it was yesterday or the day before? That means we're constantly thinking about change, and actually change can be a challenge for colleagues. Sometimes change is difficult. So I think one of the big jobs we have to do is think about how we change, and how change needs to be something that we relish, something that we enjoy, something we think is a good and positive thing that is really going to make our institution improve in the future.
Some people would say that it does take some imagination to think about the situation that a renowned geographer is now the VC of a university. What would you say to these people? I mean, Is there what's the pros and cons of geography?
Well, you're absolutely right. Vice Chancellors come from a wide range of different disciplines, and we could debate which disciplines are the best disciplines to generate people who take on leadership roles. The thing I liked about my discipline, geography is a very broad church. It's a discipline which covers a wide range of different activities, from physical geography through to human geography. That's really a very broad set of ideas, and I think a lot of the students and academics who work in the discipline of geography have demonstrated that they're able to pick up ideas from a broad set of areas. So I've always thought that geography was a good training for me. It's served me well. But of course, there are Vice Chancellors across the country from many other disciplines who I'm sure do a great job as well.
Is there any message for the Chinese students who are thinking about applying for a university like Leicester City?
Well, I think for any student thinking about a university, the first thing you have to do is really think carefully about what you're looking for. Really try and make sure you make the right decision for you. There are lots of different universities out there. They vary, they run different courses. All I can say is if you choose the University of Leicester, you'll make a wise choice and you won't regret it. You'll have an absolutely fantastic time. But of course, there are many other excellent universities out there, so in the end, make the right decision for you. That's the most important thing.
Thank you.
So you still have time on your academic research now?
Not so much. Very rarely do I manage to publish academic work. What I tend to publish more often now is policy pieces, more related to academic policy or research policy.
That's good. So let's talk about democracy. So if your decision was opposed by the students, and the students' representative, they want to have a democratic voice. So how do you coordinate with this? Will push forward for your plan to be carried out, or just stop? What's the limit? With respect to the democracy.
I think you're absolutely right that students both expect and quite rightfully should have a voice in the way that the institution is run. Let's not forget this institution is here for our students, and we've got to make sure that we provide an environment and a quality education that they believe in, that they think is as good as it can be. Hearing their voice, hearing the improvements they might have for us is really important part of that. So we work very closely with our students' union. Our head of our student union sits on our council. We have plenty of other engagements with students about their views about the institution. So, of course, there'll be times when the students have a different view to us. We won't be able to accommodate everything. But actually, there are many decisions we take in this institution that are shaped by the voice of the students. And I do think that's important. We've got to make sure they're a voice alongside the voice of our academic colleagues and others elsewhere in the institution.
So what is your last trip to China? So how is your impression? What's the difference did you see from the previous trips? Yeah.
Well, as I said earlier, one of the things I can't fail to be impressed by is every time I go back to China, something's changed. It's the rapidity of growth, the way things are really moving on. The last trip I took was a fantastic trip to Dalian University of Technology, to the campus that we're sharing with them, where we welcomed our new students. So being there to be part of the welcoming of those new students into our program was fantastic, and I hope to be back there again actually in a few months' time to welcome the next year of students as they arrive. It really is wonderful to see students who will end up getting a degree from Dalian and from the University of Leicester. They can be proud of two universities from their undergraduate program, and seeing the enthusiasm, how proactive, how keen they are, it really was a wonderful trip.
So Charles is my friend. So I met him after I got in London. So I'm just wondering, why do you have a Chinese like Charles on your team?
Well, it's important for us that we have a lot of collaborations in China, not just the Dalian University of Technology, but we've had collaborations in China for many, many years. And of course, as we go forward, I'm sure those collaborations will grow. So we need colleagues who understand the Chinese environment, can help us when we're thinking about what sorts of new opportunities we should take on. Charles is one example of those colleagues.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.